is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe live from CGTN in London. I'm Paul Barber.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. UK health officials scramble to control virus variants as a confirmed case goes missing.
State of emergency. Tough new lockdown measures take effect in the Czech Republic to tackle the world's highest COVID infection rate per capita.
Aung San Suu Kyi faces fresh charges in court as she's seen for the first time since the military takeover in Myanmar.
Plus, a court in France finds former President Nicolas Sarkozy guilty of corruption and sentences him to 3 years in jail. Also ahead.
If this means more people like me get to live their dreams and get to do what I do, I'm happy.
Chinese-born film director Chloe Zhao makes history as the first woman to win the top prize at the Golden Globes.
Please get in touch. That's the extraordinary message from health officials in England as they try to track down a person infected with what's been called a variant of concern.
The missing person is one of 6 known cases in the UK of the P1 coronavirus variant, first found in Brazil. Let's get more now on this from Guy Henderson. So, Guy, how are they trying to track down this unidentified case, and what does it say about the UK's border policy?
Yeah, well, Robin, 6 cases confirmed so far across the UK of this variant, first seen in Brazil. 2 of those cases have been identified in an area of southern Gloucestershire in the south-west of England, and a programme of surge testing has got underway there on Monday morning. We've then got 3 more confirmed cases of this same variant up in Scotland, and in both of those locations, the cases are directly linked to people who have recently returned from Brazil. But then you have this other case, this strange case of someone whose test results come back, has been sequenced, has been found as also being a case linked to this and confirmed as this new variant. But this person didn't fill out their form properly when they carried out the test, so nobody knows who this person is. Health officials are now saying that anybody who was tested in England on the 12th or 13th of February of this year and is still awaiting a result from that test should come forward as soon as possible. They are clearly worried about this. But Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, has been putting out a message of guarded reassurance for the British public.
We have no reason not to think that our vaccines are effective against these variants of concern at the present time. So, people should take that as some, as some evidence of confidence, and then also listen to what Public Health England are also saying. They don't think that there is a threat to the wider public, but obviously we're continuing to do everything we can.
Guy, critics say the government should have brought in tougher border measures sooner. Would this have made a difference in tracking this case?
Yeah, so in England, in terms of those 2 cases that have been confirmed in Gloucestershire, they were as a result of people who had travelled back, or a person who had travelled back to England before those new tough measures have been introduced, which now means that travellers coming back from places like Brazil and certain other sort of red zone countries, so to speak, must quarantine in a hotel near the airport, and that is totally mandatory. And so, for example, the opposition Labour Party has seized upon the fact that these measures hadn't been brought in place at that point for saying, well, perhaps the government should have acted quicker, perhaps it should have brought in those measures sooner. Nadeem Zahawi, the vaccines minister for the UK, was asked about this, and he said, in terms of that unidentified case at least, well, there's no telling, because of course we don't know who this person is, and we don't know whether that person caught this new variant as a result of having travelled and then come back to the UK. And, said Mr Zahawi, it's not as if there weren't other safeguards already in place.
Of course, we don't allow anyone to come from Brazil unless they are British citizens or residents of the United Kingdom, and they have to quarantine at home or now, obviously, in the hotel quarantine from those red countries, and have to take 3 tests: the pre-departure test, a test after 2 days, and a test after 8 days.
Well, officials across the United Kingdom will certainly be hoping that unidentified individual comes forward as soon as possible, and that if and when they do, of course, it turns out that that individual has been following the rules.
OK, Guy Henderson, thanks for that update.
The Czech Republic could start using Russia's Sputnik V vaccine, despite it not having been approved by the European Union. The country has recorded the world's highest per capita infection rate over the past week, driven by the spread of a new virus variant. The Czech government has now placed the country in its strictest 3-week lockdown since the start of the pandemic. I've been speaking with Peter Ludwig, a data scientist and the author of The End of Procrastination. He's also a member of a team of scientists that advise the government to make mask wearing mandatory.
Almost everyone use masks during this time, and I think that the reason was that everyone was a little bit scared, and we were the first country in Europe that made masks mandatory. But during summer, they started to believe some conspiracy theories that and misinformation that masks are somehow dangerous, and the government stopped the mask mandate during the summer because we had very good numbers, almost no new infections. And during the summer, everyone was fine. Everyone was walking around without masks. And at the end of the summer, our numbers went back again, and the infection rates started to grow again. During the September, there was an election, and the government was postponing to impose some stronger measures because people, they don't want to have the mask mandate again. So they were postponing, and that was the beginning of the second wave. And the second wave hit the country during September, October, and November, and it was very, very bad. And now we are facing the 4th wave because of the new strain of the virus, because of the British one. And it seems that we are in the worst week in the whole history of the coronavirus in Czech Republic.
And what about the public? Is there enough compliance with the rules? Is there enough support for people if they can't go to work?
Well, that's another problem. The compliance is very low. Like if you walk around the capital, around Prague, less than 50% of people, they wear face masks. And it's a complete difference between what it was during the March 2020. So it's very sad because people are tired. They believe to some misinformations and fake news about face masks, and it's very difficult to change their behavior now, because it's too late. Because during summer it was easier to not to cancel the mask mandate, but they did that, and now it's very difficult to change it back again.
And the Czech Republic is known to have a good healthcare system. How is the vaccine rollout going there?
Well, the healthcare system is great because now they are dealing with enormous number of patients, and they are doing the very incredible job. And the vaccine, with vaccine, it's again, it's kind of sad because we don't have enough vaccines, and the process is kind of slow. So we only have between 3 to 4% people vaccinated. So we need some other measures, not just vaccine, because with vaccines it's kind of slow, and we are waiting for new doses. And with those doses that there has been delivered, still it's the government is kind of slow in terms of delivering those vaccines around the country and delivering them to our patients.
China's factory output fell in February, affected by weak overseas demand and the pandemic. The Purchasing Managers' Index fell to 50.9 last month, the lowest level since last May. Despite the slowdown, manufacturers say they're confident things will improve. Huawei's chief financial officer is back in court in Canada. It's the final phase of her US extradition case. Lawyers for Meng Wanzhou say that her arrest is politically motivated. American prosecutors accuse her of breaking sanctions on Iran. The former president of Barcelona FC has been arrested after Catalan police raided the football club's offices on Monday. Josep Maria Bartomeu led the club between 2014 and 2020. Police have confirmed several arrests were made following a financial investigation into the club. The Boeing 737 MAX is set to stay grounded in China for the time being. Chinese aviation officials say safety issues remain unresolved. China was the first country to halt the use of the aircraft after it was involved in two major crashes in 2018 and 2019. Other nations have cleared it to fly again. And Japanese conglomerate SoftBank says it will invest nearly $5 billion in technology over the coming year. It'll be through its subsidiary, Z Holdings. The firm is trying to fend off competition from overseas rivals, and it follows a $30 billion merger of its internet business, Yahoo Japan, with chat app Line.
I feel ready to go. With those words, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala stepped into her new role and into the history books. The former Nigerian finance minister is the first female leader of the World Trade Organization, as well as the first African. And she is hitting the ground running. Her first day coincides with a meeting of the WTO's top decision-making body. Well, let's talk now to Andrew Wilson. So, Andrew, the new Director General is clearly a popular candidate.
Yeah, the WTO has been having its own fair share of problems over the past 6 months. The previous Director General, Robert Azevedo, the Brazilian diplomat, stepped down early 6 months ago, and since then it's been drifting somewhat. It needs all 164 members to approve the election of a new leader, and up until now it was 163 because the veto came from Donald Trump when he was President of the United States. He kept on blocking Dr. Okonjo-Iweala's appointment into the job and frustrating the efforts of the WTO to get to grips with its whole in tray of tasks that it has. She's popular because she's got experience in the World Bank, many years working there, rising to number 2 in that particular organization, and also experience of government, working as finance minister, tackling corruption in Nigeria, where many threats to her own personal safety. She persevered with initiatives that she felt were important for the economy there and for the people of that country. Some criticize her as saying she hasn't got enough experience in trade, but others see this as a fresh pair of eyes coming to an organization that, as I said, has started to struggle somewhat. She did say in her opening address to people that she looked for more accountability and that she wanted ordinary men, women and children around the world to be supported by a multilateral trade approach to the world that can help them find jobs and keep them safe and keep them as prosperous as possible and drive them away from poverty. She's very much a people's person, come from humble roots herself, elevated through hard work and dynamic activity to a very senior position, and she demonstrated this readiness of her character on the steps of the WTO headquarters in Switzerland today as she approached the meeting passed by an NGO that was demonstrating for international fishing subsidies to be looked at and regulated again by the WTO, a long-standing problem, and was quite happy to address the cameras even before taking her first session as Director General and give her thoughts on the matter.
It's been 20 years, and 20 years is enough. That's my slogan. Now we have to get it done. So that's what I have to say. So we're totally in sync with you on that.
And Andrew, clearly plenty of challenges ahead of her in this new role. Tell us about some of the main ones.
Well, we all know there's the pandemic and there's trade. These are the two big concerns in the world at the moment. And the in-tray for the Director General of the WTO is as full as any, if not fuller than most. They've got this issue of fishing subsidies, regulation of international fisheries and illegal fishing as well. That's long overdue being tackled. They have the vacant posts, also vetoed mysteriously by Donald Trump, for a panel of appeal judges to be able to oversee decisions of the WTO and help regulate when they need an outside view to come in and help make decisions. There's the e-commerce sector, which has grown massively, of course, with Amazon and Facebook and all the rest of it over the past 10 years. That's worth $26 trillion of worldwide business. That needs regulating as well, and some say the WTO should be the one to tackle it. But there's the pandemic-related issues as well, the transfer and trafficking and selling and import and export of medicines, of PPE, and making sure that developing countries get the fair share of the medical science and treatment that's going around at the moment, as much as the developed countries. The new Director General follows very much the line of the World Health Organization that this is everyone's problem. If you want to treat this problem, you have to treat everybody, not just the wealthier nations. So that will be probably the first item on the agenda. She is supported by Joe Biden, the new American president, but he has his own issues with Congress when it comes to trade, because Congress is very much focused now on USA-China trade difficulties, and so may shrink back from some of the multilateral suggestions that the WTO might start suggesting under Dr. Okonjo-Iweala. We can only see.
So quite a big to-do list then. Andrew Wilson, thanks very much.
You're watching Global Business Europe. Coming up.
Do you miss me yet? Do you miss me?
Trump is back, and he's got his sights set on 2024.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe, live from London. Just a reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion and CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Donald Trump is back. After a brief spell on the political sidelines, the former US president returned to the stage on Sunday to make his first speech since leaving office. Addressing a conservative convention in Florida, he wasted little time before looking ahead to the next presidential election in 2024.
With your help, we will take back the House, we will win the Senate, and then a Republican president will make a triumphant return to the White House. And I wonder who that will be. I wonder who that will be. Who will that be? I wonder.
Who indeed we are all wondering. Jim Spellman is live in Maryland in the US. So Jim, Trump strongly hinting he's going to run again. What alternatives do the Republican Party have?
They have no alternatives at the moment, and I think that's exactly how the former president likes it. But it's not quite as simple. They do this thing called a straw poll, kind of an informal poll of the several thousand people that attend CPAC. It found, with their big question, who do you want to be president in 2024, 55% of the participants voted for Trump. 69% say he should run for president again. I think those are actually troubling numbers for President Trump when you consider that this is the base of the base, the Trumpiest part of the Trump party, and barely 2/3 even want him to run. But They were asked, do you want the Republican Party to reflect President Trump's policies? 95% of people there said yes. So the question becomes, how do you have the party of Trump if you don't have Trump at the center? Well, I think there's two clear possibilities here. One, President Trump does choose to run, or that he will serve as some kind of kingmaker, that the road to the 2024 Republican nomination will run through him. He will try to exert that power in one of those two roles. Some good news for Republicans here. President Trump ruling out, at least for now, the possibility of him starting a third party. A third party could split Republican vote, making it almost impossible for them to take back the House or the Senate in the 2022 midterms, Paul.
So, Jim, how much does this represent the first salvo in the fight for the soul of the Republican Party?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing it really coming into play right now. Believe it or not, those 2022 midterms are just around the corner, and the Republican Party has to decide, do they want to stick with President Trump, a president who lost, keep that in mind, but has this very rabid base of support, or do they want to try to turn a corner, reclaim some of the core values of the party, and try to move ahead without Trump, knowing that they're going to risk a backlash from that base of support? Neither of those options is really what a lot of the Republican mainstream would like to see happen, especially when you consider that President Trump came out swinging at CPAC, naming names, calling out by name 10 Republican members of the House, 7 Republican members of the Senate. These are people in Congress who either sided with the Democrats in the second impeachment or who refused to back his bogus claims of voter fraud. He's also vowing to support primary challenges for these people as well as anyone who doesn't back him. If that plays out and he actually goes forward with that, whether he's successful or not in the midterms will really set a tone for this party going ahead in 2024. One of the problems here is with President Trump, the former president, trying to stay in the center of things, it really leaves no breathing room for any other candidates to really try to rise, because that would imply that they are presenting a challenge to President Trump, which means they would then be on President Trump's naughty list and face that same desire for revenge that we saw Trump display at CPAC over the weekend. Paul?
The Trump show continues. Jim Spellman in Bethesda, thank you.
Chinese investment in Australia has slumped to a 6-year low as tensions between the two continue to simmer. The amount invested there by China dropped 61% in 2020 to just over $780 million, consisting largely of real estate, mining and manufacturing deals. 20 Chinese investments in Australia were recorded last year, well below a 2016 peak of more than 100. An agreement between China and the European Union has gone into effect, covering geographical indications. That's products with specific historic links to certain areas. It's the first time China has signed such a deal with a trading partner. It's aimed to boost exports and imports of the various products. Under the deal, 100 products from each side, including alcoholic drinks, tea, food and farm produce, will be protected. Why is it important? Because of the sheer sizes of both markets. Data shows China is the third largest exporter of agri-products to the EU and the second largest buyer of EU agri-products. So we're talking tens of billions of dollars. European products are increasingly popular in China. As wealth increases, people's taste for authenticity grows. Leading the way in the first batch from the EU are Italy, France and Spain, with more than 60 products between them. And that is not the end of it. The two sides have agreed to add a further 175 products to both lists over the next 4 years, which will bring the total number of protected products to 550. Let's talk now to Tony Waterman, who joins us live from Brussels. So, Tony, who is going to benefit the most from this agreement?
Well, Robin, in terms of countries, it looks like France will be the biggest beneficiary. More than a quarter of the items on this list are French products, including iconic items like champagne and Roquefort cheese. In terms of the products themselves, on the EU side of things, it is overwhelmingly alcoholic beverages, which will be the big beneficiaries here, 72 of the 100 items. So this includes Spanish cava, Bavarian beer, and also Irish whiskey. On the China side of things, it's teas that get the widest protection. 28 of the 100 items, including Pura tea and Anji and Angxi teas as well. Now, being on this GI list offers protection for these items under the law, but it also could make it cheaper to ship these items and get that protection in certain places. So, for instance, the products coming from China into the EU, those companies are no longer going to have to apply for that type of protection. So that in the long term will save them money.
And Tony, it would seem that perhaps Europeans are not as familiar with the Chinese products as the Chinese are with European ones. So will this give the Chinese GI products a bigger presence?
Well, it will certainly make it easier and cheaper to have a presence here in Europe. And for European consumers, it gives them the assurance that what they are buying is the real deal, that it is the authentic product. If they're buying a Pura tea and they're paying top dollar for that, they want to know that that is what they are getting at the end of the day. And for the producers, the tea growers, the winemakers, the cheese makers, this gives them protection against counterfeiters, intimidators who use that recognition of the brand or the region to try to cash in and oftentimes putting forward inferior products that then undercut the value of that brand. So it gives the assurance for the consumers and also for the producers, which you have to remember, a lot of these companies are passing down these skill sets, this cultural heritage through the generations. And certainly the trade that goes on between the EU and China is accelerating, at least when it comes to traded goods. China was the EU's top trading partner in goods last year. Bilateral trade was about $650 billion. That is more than goods in trading goods when it came to the United States. Now, this deal is not going to dramatically or significantly increase those trading figures. But when you take into consideration that the EU and China also just reached an investment deal, you have a growing middle class in China, you have more recognition of Chinese products here in Europe. A lot of experts saying that the only trajectory here for trade between the two is up.
OK, Tony Waterman in Brussels. Many thanks.
Earlier, CGTN's Zhang Ning spoke with China's ambassador to France. He explained why protecting the origins of products can help boost trade and foster healthier export markets.
France is one of the European countries that stands to benefit the most from the China-EU GI agreement. France's agri-products have been famous throughout history. Its bread, wine and cheese are popular in the Chinese market, and the agreement will facilitate French agricultural exports to China. The agreement also protects Chinese products. At the moment, China's agricultural exports to Europe are still relatively small, but there are also some well-known brands in China, including Chinese liquor Baijiu. With the agreement coming into force, both sides are paying more attention to the protection of intellectual property rights. In a word, the new deal provides institutionalized protection. It will help enhance Chinese enterprises' awareness of IPR protection and boost their exports to Europe. For example, businesses will think carefully how to name their products properly before exporting them. So, with the new deal, Chinese exports to the European market will be more standardized and orderly, which in turn is conducive to exporting.
Well, Jurg Vodka is the president of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China. He says the deal is a real achievement for trade relations between China and the EU.
The deal that was signed last year, the geographic indications, was definitely a breakthrough. Keep also in mind that actually such a deal doesn't exist between the United States and European Union. It's a real achievement between Europe and China to pinpoint 100 products in order to safeguard their names and the original landscape. It's really important for marketing. And I hope it's going to be basically the beginning of a couple of more agreements. Investment agreement came next. That's going to be challenged. But there are lots of stuff like biodiversity, climate change, WTO, where actually Europe and China, after all, two of the three major economies can actually do stuff together. So it's not a world-shattering agreement on geographic indications, but it's just very telling that actually Europe and China get things done.
Italian producers are hoping the agreement between China and the EU will boost exports and help drive a post-pandemic recovery. Hermione Kitson reports from Parma, the home of the famous Italian ham.
Prosciutto di Parma is a jewel of the Made in Italy brand, a tradition that's been handed down for generations. For the Sassi family, production dates back 120 years.
Prosciutto di Parma is really traditional product because it's really connected with the Parma area for the special weather condition that we have in Parma.
It's one of 26 premium Italian products in a new European geographical indication agreement with China that came into effect in March.
It's a protection also not only for our producers but also for the consumers because they know that when they buy Prosciutto di Parma, they buy the authentic one.
Other products of excellence on the list include Parmigiano Reggiano and Modena's balsamic vinegar.
A GI is more than a product, it's actually an heritage of a community.
The pigs must be bred in Italy with a specific diet, be at least 9 months old and weigh on average 170 kilos.
The skin of the prosciutto, we have the passport of every single leg that we produce because we have the tattoo of the farm where the pig is born.
Along the production line, no additives are used.
Prosciutto di Parma is a completely natural product. The ingredient is only the Italian sea salt, Italian pork meat, thyme and love.
After being cured for at least 12 months, each prosciutto undergoes rigorous checks before being given the crown of approval.
So this is the guarantee of authenticity of Parma ham.
Italy started exporting Prosciutto di Parma to China 10 years ago. Since then, it's become the second biggest market in Asia, with 25,000 hams sent there each year. It's a lot fewer than the 600,000 exported to the US each year, but the Chinese market can't be underestimated.
I think the Chinese market have a very big potential because the Chinese customer, they have a very important knowledge how to consume pork meat.
Producers are confident that slowly but surely this GI agreement with China will boost exports and help in the country's pandemic recovery. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Parma.
For more on the China-EU agreement on those protected products, please go to the specials section of our website. There you will see more stories of how the deal is changing the lives of people on both sides.
Still to come on CGTN, celebrations and midnight haircuts in Germany as lockdown restrictions begin easing.
Patient after patient after patient. They take a long time to get better. They're the sickest patients we've ever seen.
It's a race against time because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under.
We're dealing with something we knew very little about.
Europe's first 2 epicentres in February have received their first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Another day, another grim milestone for the UK in its fight against COVID-19. 100,000 people have now lost their lives after contracting the virus.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, making a last clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
all be very busy when we're trying to save the world. We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Hi there, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Robin Dwyer and Paul Barber. Our top stories again. UK health officials scramble to control virus variants as a confirmed case goes missing.
Aung San Suu Kyi faces fresh charges in court as she's seen for the first time since the military takeover in Myanmar.
And Chinese-born film director Chloe Zhao makes history as the first woman to win the top prize at the Golden Globes.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 3 years in jail for corruption. 2 of those years are suspended, and he'll be allowed to serve the remaining time under house arrest. The 66-year-old was accused of trying to bribe a judge in exchange for information on an inquiry into his campaign finances. Ross Cullen has the latest from Paris.
It's a legal landmark for post-war France, a former president in court, on trial and found guilty of corruption. Here in this court, the Paris tribunal, Nicolas Sarkozy and his lawyer Thierry Herzog, along with the magistrate they tried to bribe, all found guilty and sentenced to jail. But before any custodial sentence is applied, there is the appeals process, and even then, the possibility of serving time with an ankle tag instead of behind bars. This case was centred on allegations that Sarkozy tried to bribe a magistrate to hand over recordings of him in return for a plush job in Monaco. Sarkozy was French president from 2007 to 2012, winning election on the promise of looser labour regulations and lower taxes, but he's been embroiled in a litany of legal woes since leaving office. Now, he goes back on trial later this month over claims that executives at a public relations firm created fake invoices to mask overspending on his failed 2012 re-election bid. Also, in January, prosecutors started looking into alleged influence peddling by Sarkozy over his advisory activities in Russia, and there's an ongoing investigation into his 2007 presidential campaign. It's alleged that that was backed by a nearly $60 million donation by the Gaddafi government in Libya. Now, the only precedent for Monday's guilty verdict was the trial of Sarkozy's predecessor Jacques Chirac, but he was not present in court for his trial due to ill health. Chirac got a 2-year suspended sentence for having arranged bogus jobs for political allies when he was mayor of the French capital. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
Global stocks have rallied as bond markets stabilise, following a government bond sell-off last week. Despite that, there are concerns over the possibility of spiralling global inflation, fuelled by massive government spending and pent-up demand. Well, Jasmine Birtles is from the financial website moneymagpie.com, and she joins us now. Good to see you there, Jasmine. So inflation's often seen as a sign of improving growth. So why are the markets so jittery over this, and should we be worried?
Well, yes, it's true. As you say, a certain amount of inflation is a healthy sign. And the Bank of England, together with other banks around the world, other central governments, are looking for around a 2% inflation rate. Something around that amount is a nice, healthy number. At the moment, inflation in this country has risen to 0.7%. That's still pretty low. But yes, the fact that it has actually risen a little bit has put a little bit of a warning in people's thoughts. But in answer to your question about why we're so concerned about it, there have been concerns growing over the last few months, particularly during the lockdown, that there's been a lot of money printing, essentially quantitative easing going on very much in America, certainly in this country, in Britain, certainly in Europe. I mean, in America, we've heard it's over $2 trillion that Biden has said that they're going to inject into the economy. And when that happens, when you have that level of quantitative easing, that amount of money swishing around the economy, the idea of it is to get people to spend. And of course, when people spend, if they spend a lot, then that tends to push prices up.
So there was this big global sell-off on Friday. Are we going to see more of that?
We may do. Yeah, I think it's going to be a bumpy ride, honestly, this year in terms both of bonds and also of equities, because still nobody really knows what's happening. You know, it's different in different countries, of course, but gradually the West is starting to come out of lockdown. So that means that at some point, and frankly, nobody knows when, but at some point, people are going to be able to spend again. Really, over the last year, spending has been very patchy. There's been hardly any spending on travel, very little, frankly, on clothes, you know, hospitality, all of those, the sort of things that we normally spend on, much of it has been suppressed. Now, when things open, we think, but we don't know, that quite a lot of people will go out and spend. A lot of people won't, but quite a few, there's a pent-up demand. So that should mean that that should push inflation, but it may be short-lived. Quite a few commentators are saying that it's likely to be a big burst and then it might sort of drop back. So that means potentially that we might have a bit of a burst of inflation and then it'll drop back, and it could even worsen. I mean, when I say worsen, inflation could go down if a lot of people lose their jobs. In America, in Britain, in Europe generally, in the West, and it's looking like quite a lot of people will be losing their jobs. If they do, and a lot of businesses are likely to fold, many already have, that means less money in the economy to go and spend. So it's a balancing act in all of these economies. It's a balancing act for the central banks and the central governments to try and keep things going, keep that healthy amount of spending, healthy amount of growth, but not let the economies overheat, and ideally not let them drop so much that it goes into deflation.
Well, really good to have your analysis. Thank you so much, Jasmine Birtles. Well, is it the beginning of the end for lockdowns in Germany? After 2.5 months, restrictions are being eased across the country. Hair salons and other businesses can open once again in several states. That's despite a threat of rising infections. Our correspondent Ryan Thompson is live in Frankfurt with more for us now. So, Ryan, how much pressure is Angela Merkel under to expedite the end of lockdowns?
Hi there, Paul. Well, there's quite a bit of pressure, and that seems to be growing, especially among business owners who say that their patience is just running thin. 1 month has turned into 2, and then now we are approaching the 3 and the 4-month mark. And the government has said, even though infections are currently rising, they want to see the infection rate reach 35 cases for every 100,000 people. And at this point, we are just nowhere close to that. That is the threshold in order for businesses to reopen. So there are some growing concerns here that Germany simply won't be able to reach that point in its point to end this lockdown. The latest estimates say that the economy is going to contract about 1.5% during the first quarter of this year. The economy minister has come to the forefront during this crisis, trying to sort of bridge businesses to the federal government in Berlin, and he's had some small victories for them, expanding aid access and helping to potentially soften the blow a bit, but there are still a bleak message about many challenges that lie ahead for Germany's businesses, as potentially avoiding a potentially more damaging third wave lockdown.
And Ryan, Germany has been toughening border restrictions in recent days. How likely are they to tighten even further?
Absolutely. Well, whatever reopening Germany has in store, it's likely to be Germany on its own as it focuses on keeping its internal health safe and keeping out these foreign discovered variants that could potentially set back some of their progress that they've made so far. Starting tomorrow, we will see restrictions on the border with France, notably the Moselle region, which is about 200 kilometers from us here in Frankfurt. Cross-border traffic will be restricted to just commuters. That's expected to be about 16,000 people who will have to submit themselves to one of those antigen rapid tests every 48 hours as they're going back and forth. It's a bit of a victory for the French, who were very keen to keep this border between Germany and France as unrestricted as possible. They held late talks yesterday, and Germany sort of softened their stance, avoiding some of those harder restrictions that we currently see on the border with the Czech Republic and parts of Austria.
OK, thanks so much, Ryan. Ryan Thompson reporting from Frankfurt there.
Many of Spain's 17 regions, including Madrid and Catalonia, are relaxing COVID-19 restrictions. It comes despite Madrid having one of the country's highest infection rates. Rahul Pathak reports from the Spanish capital.
Now, the decision to relax some of its COVID-19 rules comes as Spain edges its way slowly out of the third wave of the pandemic. Now, one of Spain's most populous regions, Catalonia, of which Barcelona is the capital, has had some of the country's strictest lockdown measures. But from Monday, it is allowing the reopening of shopping malls and shopping centres. So it's still being very, very cautious. The bulk of its COVID-19 restrictions remain in force, which is bad news for the region's hospitality industry. They, of course, can still only open in 2 shifts, 2 3-hour shifts, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and the industry say that's unfair. Well, other regions that also rely heavily on hospitality as well as tourism are reopening for business. The Balearics are opening their bars and restaurants on the islands of Mallorca and Formentera, albeit in a limited capacity. Ibiza's bars and clubs and restaurants, though, they remain closed for the time being. Now, the Valencia region is allowing the reopening of sidewalk cafes. However, sitting inside bars and restaurants is still prohibited. Now, as for Madrid, which already enjoys some of the most relaxed COVID-19 rules in the country, well, it is lifting some localised lockdowns of suburbs in and around the city centre. It means that just 6% of Madrid's 6.6 million residents are now living under some kind of restriction to their movements. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
Excavations have resumed at the ancient city of Pompeii after a long break due to COVID-19. And archaeologists have unearthed one of their most astounding discoveries in years. It's a ceremonial chariot that seems to have survived almost intact after the city was buried by an eruption almost 2,000 years ago. For more pictures, go to our website at europe.cgtn.com. The UK's Prince Philip has been transferred to another hospital as he continues treatment for an infection. The 99-year-old husband of the Queen was originally admitted as a precautionary measure after feeling unwell almost a fortnight ago. Buckingham Palace says he'll carry on treatment and also undergo testing and observation for a pre-existing heart condition. Dozens of activists have appeared in court in Hong Kong on charges of conspiracy to commit subversion. Hundreds of protesters gathered outside the court in West Kowloon. The charges come under the new national security law, which took effect last year. Beijing and Hong Kong authorities say it upholds basic law and protects against subversion. Protesters argue it undermines Hong Kong's autonomy and freedoms. The UN is calling on international donors to raise nearly $4 billion to prevent widespread famine in Yemen. More than 100 governments and donors are taking part in a virtual pledging conference co-hosted by Sweden and Switzerland. Tens of thousands have been killed in the civil war, which has lasted 6 years. Iran says it will return to nuclear talks if the US lifts sanctions first. However, US President Joe Biden says Iran must make the first step and comply with the deal before the US can re-engage in meaningful diplomacy. Donald Trump withdrew from the agreement, which was reached in 2015, aimed at limiting Iran's nuclear capabilities. A flash of light lit up the UK on Sunday night as a meteor blazed through clear skies. More than 100 people reported seeing the fireball as it hit the Earth's atmosphere. Several videos were later shared across social media, with some reporting a boom as it passed overhead.
Aung San Suu Kyi has appeared in court in Myanmar to face new charges. It's her first appearance since she was arrested during a military takeover. Protesters clashed with police once again over the weekend, leaving at least 18 dead. Dave Grunebaum has more.
Aung San Suu Kyi faces 2 additional charges. The first for allegedly violating a colonial-era law that prohibits the publication of information that could cause fear or alarm. The other for allegedly violating a law that requires proper licenses for equipment. Now, she was already facing charges on 2 other alleged violations. An import-export law over walkie-talkies that belonged to her security detail, and also for allegedly violating the natural disaster management law of the country. Now, critics have pounced on all these charges, saying they are politically motivated, trumped-up charges that have no legitimate legal basis. Now, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations foreign ministers are having a virtual meeting on Tuesday to discuss the crisis in Myanmar. ASEAN could play a really important role here because it's the organization, out of all the multinational organizations out there, this is the one that can have the most influence in Myanmar. It's well known that in Myanmar, including the generals, value their membership in ASEAN even more than their membership in the United Nations. But for ASEAN to come up with something down the road that all sides could agree on will take some difficult diplomatic acrobatic work. In the short term, it would be an accomplishment if ASEAN could just get the military generals to agree to no more lethal force against the demonstrators. But long term, finding a way to diffuse this situation and come up with a plan that all sides will agree with, very difficult. I mean, last week, Reuters leaked a plan that some ASEAN members had to possibly have an election in roughly a year. ASEAN would send observers to make sure that it was free and fair. But demonstrators were very much opposed to this whole idea because they believe they had that free and fair election back in November. And the results gave Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League for Democracy a landslide victory. And the military did not like it, and that's why they staged this military takeover on February 1st. And a lot of demonstrators, they don't want an election a year from now. They want the results of the November election honored. Now, getting to what's going on the streets, after a very deadly day on Sunday, thousands of demonstrators came back out on the streets in communities across the country on Monday. Some of these protesters have said they believe this is a cause worth dying for because they believe if they do not stand up to this military government now and try to end this military takeover, they believe that any hope of having a legitimate democracy in this country will be gone for at least another generation. Dave Grunebaum, CGTN.
UN human rights experts have called for the immediate release of Alexei Navalny and demanded an international investigation into his poisoning. The Russian opposition leader was transferred to a prison colony east of Moscow over the weekend. Senior officials at the body described Navalny's poisoning and imprisonment as an attempt to quash dissent in Russia.
You're watching CGTN. Coming up, back to school in China, but phones are banned from the classroom.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
NPC and CPPCC, China's biggest annual political gathering of lawmakers and political advisors. As the world's second largest economy recovers from the pandemic, it chalks out plans for the coming year and beyond. With new proposals, laws, and targets, CGTN brings you unmatched coverage of the meetings that matter. Exclusive interviews, people's voices, in-depth analysis, and the impact on the rest of the world. China's 2 sessions begins March 4th. Live and exclusive on CGTN.
Welcome back. Tens of millions of pupils are returning to school across China, but they're having to leave their phones at home as a new classroom ban takes effect. But But are they happy without their handsets? Sun Ye has been finding out.
Even if they have cell phones with them, students must now turn off their handsets and leave them locked up during school hours to help avoid distraction and protect their eyesight. But can this generation of whiz-kids really go without their phones? Well, many say they are already used to spending much of their school day offline.
I never bring my phone to school, and I only use it at home. So I understand the new policy, which is aimed at removing distractions.
In the end, it's all about time and self-control. Even before this, I limited my own screen time and would never stay up late to play games. It's about rational use.
We've had a similar restriction for quite some time now. The students' parents support the policy too. If they need to speak to their children in an emergency, they can contact us.
Except for the cell phone ban, Chinese Ministry of Education also demanded less homework and more physical exercises for students starting the new semester.
We've seen a host of measures recently, including phone restrictions and homework reductions. They all contribute to the same goal of providing healthy, well-rounded development for the students. This creates a balanced environment where students can advance intellectually and physically.
Li said for a generation who grew up with the internet, the key is to watch out for overuse, not doing without it entirely. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
Hollywood A-listers swapped the red carpet for the comfort of their sofas on Sunday for the Golden Globes Awards ceremony. In a year when our screens were dominated by Netflix and other online providers, the big winners of the night were the comedy Borat subsequent movie film and the drama Nomadland, directed by Chloe Zhao, who became the first female of Asian descent to win Best Director. Zhao's success saw a congratulatory tweet from Barbra Streisand, the last woman to have won the award for Best Director at the Golden Globes. The win came as a happy surprise for Zhao. Her film Nomadland also won Best Drama, the top prize of the night. And this is what she had to say.
I'm sure there's many other before me that deserve the same recognition. I just love what I do. You know, I just really love it. And if this means more people like me get to live their dreams and get to do what I do, I'm happy.
Well done to her. Our main stories again. UK health officials are scrambling to control virus variants as a confirmed case goes missing.
Tough new lockdown measures have gone into effect in the Czech Republic as it battles the world's highest COVID infection rate per capita.
And a court in France has found former President Nicolas Sarkozy guilty of corruption and sentenced him to 3 years in jail.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com and follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're available to watch on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well, of course, as CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of us in London, goodbye.